Se está preso no sonho do outro, tá fudido.
Hello. So that was the movie A Machine to Live In. And we're now here joined by Meredith Zielke, who is the co-director of this movie. And now you're talking to Alma and Kerstin and Iliana. And we just want to start by saying congratulations to receiving our award. And we've been watching your film and we all think it's very fascinating. So we have a few questions for you if you have time to answer.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, first of all, just having watched the movie, something that really stands out is when I think it's Bolsonaro's face is like glued over the face of another man. And I was wondering what you were thinking when you made that decision and what it means.
I love that question also because you noticed. There's I will say just to start that it's not all the time that someone notices that Bolsonaro's face is deep faked over the person who's playing him, who's playing Oscar Niemeyer, because a lot of people usually are reading the subtitles or paying attention to the scenery, so they miss that detail. But I love that you noticed. So part of our motivation to overlay Bolsonaro's face or have his face change over into someone else's face is for a couple different reasons. Number one, we tried to frame the film so that, whether or not we're talking about futurist utopias or cult religions or nationalism and politics and elite politics and electoral politics, we tried to put them all in the same frame with the same scrutiny. So, and also to replace the image with Bolsonaro's face at the end is to dissect at least at the time, the current leadership in Brazil, and to replace one powerful, corrupt man's face with another's. So it was also to make the film more current, because the film in a way is timeless, but we did want to point fingers a little bit at current politics in Brazil, because there was so much going on that we intentionally left out, but we needed something to make it current and show our own opinion and own it.
Okay, yeah. It was really jarring and thought-provoking, and I liked it a lot.
Thank you.
There are some parts in the movie where we're introduced to space in some way. So one of the questions we came up with was how did the combination of space and Brasilia come together in the first place?
Yes, that's a great question. There's a couple ways I can introduce space to the conversation. First of all, the city was built in the late 60s. And so it was, all throughout the 50s all throughout the 60s and 70s. So there was a huge influence of space and space research and space sci-fi TV shows and movies that influenced the architecture of the city. So when you go to the esoteric community that we focused on in the film, they had a lot of different references to the architecture when they were building the site. So they were looking at different religious buildings. They were looking at the architecture in the Capitol, and they were also looking at sci-fi TV shows to influence the imagery that they were inspired by, and also the architecture. So space was a huge inspiration for the both the Capitol and the UFO communities in terms of architecture. But also something that we didn't put in the film was that when they were building the city of Brasilia, they formed a committee that went out to that surveyed the land before they built the city. And part of the team of surveyors were I think that they were astrophysicists who joined the team because they wanted to consider a top-down view of the city or consider the sky as part of the elements that influence the city. And so in a lot of our shots, we feature the sky because they call the sky the ocean of Brasilia, because it's a main feature that in other cities are not so considered.
Wow, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about this before, but I was wondering, because in the film, the city of Brasilia is portrayed in such a beautiful way, and the entire film is like an homage to the city, but it's also sometimes almost like a warning. You talk about that it's haunted and that it can depress you and so on. So I was wondering, are there any like mixed feelings for you about the place, or what's your thoughts on that?
That's a great question too. Yeah, it's too simple to say that we're in love with the city. I think that the deep history made us, and the nuanced, complex history of the city, like all cities, made us really interested in filming, because we filmed over the past, 8 or 9 years. So there was lots of like layers of research that went into people, politics, spaces, architecture, and then also, like we were talking about before with the space influence, we talked with our director of photography on how to shoot, how to film the city, so that all of those sci-fi posters from the 1970s, so that we can really use that aesthetic of sci-fi documentary, because we consider this a sci-fi documentary. But in terms of your question, wait, can you remind me what your question was?
Yes, of course. I was wondering if you have any mixed feelings about the city, and that you talked a bit about.
Yes, for sure. I think that all of us, we have a team of 4 people, and it's it's Sebastian, our producer, Yoni, our director, me, co-director, and then Andrew, our EP and DP. We all collectively feel very very critical of all cities and all governments. And so we walked into that situation knowing that, and that the city itself would be joyous and productive and rich of culture, but only because the people who make up the city came from all over the country. So, when they built the city of Brasilia, a lot of the laborers who built the city, they were not allowed any property ownership after they built. And they were promised it, but they never received it. And so they ended up forming communities and cities around the capital. And that's what built up this rich culture. And those themselves became bigger and more productive and more efficient and more successful cities, arguably speaking, than the capital. And so all this culture is coming from people who are not the governmental elite. They came from all over the country to seek purpose, and because of this idea of utopia, and supposedly building a city from scratch. But when they weren't received the land and property, they created it themselves. So I'm not a huge fan of the government. I'm not a huge fan of how the city and the country is run. But it's really the people that flourished and made us love it.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of the people, I was wondering how you were received. Like, were people excited to tell you about Brasilia, or were they like nervous or suspicious, or how was the vibe?
That's a good question too. So it took us maybe 4 years to actually film inside the Capitol, inside the buildings that make up the government. And the reason for that is maybe obvious, that it takes a lot of paperwork and a connection to film inside. So inside, once we gained access to the Capitol, we were, I think that we were just seen as a commercial, possibly a commercial team. And so we were better received for that reason because we had access to the Capitol. But it took a very long time to get in. And before that point that we gained access, we were seen as suspicious, for sure, because no one knew our intentions. But then we met the Freemasons in the city. And the Freemasons also, there's a large percentage of Freemasons that are also work inside the Capitol, either as a congressman or a senator. So that was our access point. And so then we were not seen as suspicious anymore. We were seen as friendly. And then in the UFO religious communities, we were at first seen as suspicious, and then we gained mutual trust over the course of the years. They really had a hard time with TV crews in Brazil misrepresenting them in the media. And so they were suspicious of us, thinking that we would approach their communities the same way, but we didn't. So we gave them a lot of footage that they can use internally for their own communities. And then we went there often and became friends with a few leaders in the community that things were really mutually respectful and friendly the rest of the time.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And also, like, it's very interesting that you've been working on it for so many years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I do have another question, and I was wondering, you talked a bit before that you see the movie as a sci-fi documentary. Was that something you planned beforehand, or did that kind of come about as you created the project?
I think that we've always seen it as a sci-fi documentary. There's a little bit of personal background where I didn't mention yet. So Yoni is from Israel, from a very modernist city in Israel that was built. The myth behind the city he was born in Netanya, Israel, is that it was built from scratch. But we all know that that's a myth. There's always a people and a culture that exist before a city was built. And so he was deeply rooted to the idea because of that. And then I'm from Detroit in the United States, which is known in the US as, you know, where the automobile was made, really, in the US. And so we all have an eye for the myth of a city being built from scratch and for a particular reason. And those reasons often fail. When it comes to utopias, they often fail. But we wanted the film to be less about the failure of utopia and more about the need for multiple utopias to happen, for utopias to be relevant and for them to make sense with our needs in society. And so I think that because of where, you know, and Andrew, our DP and EP, his father worked in Brazil, working in engineering and agriculture. And then Sebastian, who lived half of his life in Brazil, he already had a deep scrutiny and eye for you know, critical thinking when it came to the government and how the country was run. So I think all of that is sci-fi to us. You know, sci-fi is just creating and considering alternative realities. And I think that the aesthetic that we shot the film in and the way that we talked about who's in power and who else is actually more successful than those in power makes it sci-fi.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it might be time for us to round up, but I want to thank you so much for answering our questions and for letting us take part of your movie, and congratulations again on the award.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you and this award so much. And thank you from the rest of our team.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night, everyone.
Okay, so now it is time to round up this live stream. And the movie that is going to be shown now is called The New Bauhaus, The Life and Legacy of Mahaly Nagy. This movie will not be available to see later. It's just for a show now. So make sure to catch it if you're interested. And we hope to see you tomorrow at the Västerkyrkan otherwise. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for following us.